Boom. Welcome into On the Horn. I figured out how to start the intro bumper and start the show live and on time. I'm now producing by myself, folks. No Texas Homer. Thanks to him for all he's done. He helped set me up, teach me the ways of the computer. Unfortunately, I'm an iPad kid and a communications major, so I never learned how to use computers properly. I still type like this, but we're here. We're rolling. I've got us started tonight. And we've got a loaded show for you. As always, we do not believe in the offseason here at Inside Texas. We plan to talk about Texas football all year round. As hard as that may get at times, we will do it. We're up to the task. And we may talk basketball. I'm going to make a pledge to myself, as I said last episode. I will talk basketball if they get ranked. They do have a game against Arkansas tomorrow night, but I'm sure not many of you care. But one day we will, and hopefully around March Madness we will. But yeah, we've got a loaded show for you tonight. I was just bumping some Alabama, Song of the South. Great song. I wish I could play it with you guys, but unfortunately YouTube would strike us down. But I was getting in a good move, trying to get right in the headspace for my first ever host and live show. No help, no Texas Homer beforehand. So let's get into it, guys. We're loaded tonight. We're going to be talking about J.D. Pickell's top 10 coaches. J.D. Pickell, friend of the program. I say that a little more seriously than I usually do. J.D. is loosely a friend. I'm not bragging. Knew his little brother at Baylor, and his little brother was nice enough to connect me to JD. And JD has always been helpful to me as I've gotten started on this journey of trying to get into sports media and whatnot. So we're going to look at JD's top 10 coaches. Of course, Steve Sarkisian's on the list. It wouldn't be a top 10 coach list if Sark was not on that list. Then we're going to talk about Texas's record and all-time wins, where they line up on the all-time wins list. And since 2000, look at more of the modern era in the last 5 years and see, what you guys think of the program currently and historically, and where we kind of rank Texas and how we feel about Texas lining up with, other great programs of the sport. And then finally, Jahdae Barron was inducted into the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame. I had to reread that when I saw that, but we're going to talk about that. I think it was something to do with the Thorpe Award. Pretty cool thing. We're going to get into that. But first, we got to start with our friend J.D. Pickell and his top 10 list and just sort of break it down by coach. So first, I'm just, what interested me when I saw this list, of course, was just how much a lot of these guys get paid. So I wrote down in my notes just so of these top 10, Kirby's making $13 million. Dabo makes $11 million. Sark, $10 million. Lincoln Riley, conspicuously not on this list, makes $10 million. Ryan Day makes $10 million. Mike Norvell makes $10 million. That one's, I don't know if he gets paid $1 million per season loss. Too soon. DeBoer gets $10 million. Belichick gets $10 million. That one, he earned his stripes in a different league of this sport, but he deserved that $10 million, I'd say. And then Brian Kelly, $10 million. And shout out to my Kentucky Wildcats. Mark Stoops makes $9 million, whether you agree with that or not. So those are your top 10 highest paid coaches. Now, a lot, there is some overlap, and obviously some guys are omitted from that list. Lincoln Riley, who we wish him well. That's what we say. We wish him well over at USC, our former foe and rival Lincoln Riley. Not friend of the program, Lincoln Riley. Maybe one day if he comes around. But so just to start with this list, naturally you got to put Kirby Smart at the top. Kirby Smart has a 105-19 record. I mean, that's nuts. And I believe he just finished his 9th season because he started in 2016. Obviously was a coordinator with Saban for a while. He's 2 national titles. And that's the thing is that was big talk in the Final Four, was that one of these coaches would win a title for the first time. Sark was searching for it, Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman. And because Kirby wasn't in it and Dabo wasn't in it, because now with Saban gone, there's just so many coaches. Mac Brown's now gone that just haven't won a national title. There's now like 3 active coaches in college football that have won titles, because Harbaugh left, of course, after last year. But so Smart, I think you got to give him the nod. I'm personally not as high on Kirby Smart as other people probably are. I think he's more of a motivator recruiter type. The way I grade coaches, and JD's list, as I get into it, he's got a lot right, but I disagree with some of the rankings and some guys not being on the list, and some guys should be and some guys shouldn't be, in my opinion. But when you look at it, like I like to look at it, all right, who could win anywhere, right? Could Kirby Smart win at, say, Washington like Kalen DeBoer did? Could Kirby Smart take Washington to a national title? You guys let me know. In my opinion, I don't think so. So that's kind of how I rate coaches, is like, could Kirby Smart win anywhere? Now, when you go in this upper echelon, it's like all these guys you can kind of mix and match. Like Sark would win at Georgia. Sark would win at Ohio State. Sark would win at Bama, Oregon, Notre Dame, probably LSU, Penn State, Tennessee, you name it, right? Sark would win there. And same with Kirby and Day and all these guys, because they know how to recruit. They're used to having the resources and whatnot. And a lot of them, similar to Sark, similar to Kirby, similar to Day, they all were coordinators in these great programs, and then they get elevated. They know how to, it's big league ball, right? DeBoer is one of the only guys on this list, and Heupel, that wanted a low level. Marcus Freeman, he was immediately Notre Dame coach in his first head coaching gig. But, Dan Lanning, immediate first head coaching gig, Oregon. Sark, his first head coaching gig was Washington. And he kind of had to pick them up out of the dumps from like a 1-11 season, or maybe even 0-12. They were really bad when he first got there, and he got them up to a competitive team. But yeah, the way I like to look at it is, like I said, is can you win anywhere? How translative, there's a big word of the day for you. Translative, does it translate your success where you are, right? And I think Kirby Smart is a great coach, but I also think he's a great coach because of his situation. I think he's more motivated recruiter type. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. His defense schemed up quite a good game plan against Coach Sark's offense a couple times there. But yeah, we saw he still can't get over the Alabama hump. You can count 2021 if you want, that 22 title after they lost the first game, then won the second one. But yeah, Ryan Day, I don't know if I would put him as the second best coach in America. His 70-10 record is like the fifth best starting record in college football history, which is insane. But you got to remember, you're starting at Ohio State, right? And where was Ohio State when he got there? So that's where I kind of look at, where was Ohio State when he got there? Well, they'd already won a title 5 years prior with Urban Meyer. And, Ryan Day inherited a 12-win team, a 13-win team year in and year out, right? So Sark, when he came in, it's a little different scenario. Like Texas is, they're up here in comparison to 90% of college football. But where was Texas in 2020 and 2021? They were not on the same level as, say, Oregon when Dan Lanning took over, or Ohio State, or Georgia was a little, Kirby had to build that program. I'll give it to him. Mark Richt didn't have the best years at the end, was kind of like, they were like a 9-win program, 10-win program, but they were not a national power. So I'll give that to Kirby. But, Dabo built something. A lot of these guys built something, but like most of them at this top level, when you just talk Ryan Day and like DeBoer, obviously, and Dan Lanning, a lot of these guys inherited a team that was already really good, right? So Sark comes in, that team goes 5-7 in his first year. His recruiting class wasn't great in 21. Then NIL super charged the Texas program, I would say, getting Kelvin Banks and then, of course, Quinn Ewers and all that. But yeah, Sark, I think, is, he's probably in that top 5 range, in my opinion. The thing is like, when you really get into it, I think DeBoer, I like DeBoer over Sark. I mean, DeBoer, I just think, has beat him head to head. DeBoer won at Washington. DeBoer won at Fresno State. DeBoer is, overall an 113-16 coach, right? He can win anywhere. He went 9-3 at Fresno, 11-2 at Washington immediately, 14-1 in his second year at UW. Like that, like you got to give that to DeBoer, and it goes back to what I was saying. Like guys, like I think Kurt Signetti, Coach Sig, you got to put Coach Sig on this list. As much as he's a little bit of a cocky guy, I think Coach Sig is a similar guy, right? He wins at crappy places. That's where you got to give these guys props, right? Is Coach Sig can win anywhere. So can, Kalen DeBoer. So I think Kalen DeBoer is probably a better coach than Sark for all of, Sark's great things that he's done. He is the guy who officially has brought Texas back, but he's 0-4 against, DeBoer and Smart, right? And Sark hasn't been able to beat DeBoer, and it seems like he kind of got out schemed against DeBoer offensively and against Kirby defensively. Like we saw in the first matchup and the second matchup, not much of what Sark was scheming up seemed to be working. And now here's the thing on that note, right? I'm saying right now, right? We saw with Ryan Day. Right now, it didn't seem like Ryan Day could dig himself out of a hole multiple times in the last 3-4 years, right? And Sark's not at that point at all. But while we thought maybe, Ryan Day's never going to win a natty, I'm saying this, and Sark has had Texas back for 2 seasons, not 5, 6 seasons, and he's not getting there. I'm just saying right now, I'm not going to give him the nod over guys who have won national titles, guys who have been to national titles, DeBoer, for example, Marcus Freeman, for example. Yeah, I think if you're going to compare Sark to people, you got to compare him more in that, like, compare him to Dan Lanning, compare him to, say, Marcus Freeman or James Franklin, Brian Kelly. I think Lane Kiffin should be on this list because Lane Kiffin has done all that at Ole Miss, right? He's 44-18 at Ole Miss. He's got 3 10-win seasons at Ole Miss. He had 2 at FAU, 1 at USC. The thing is that Sark has 2 10-win seasons all time, right? Now, a lot of that is he didn't really get the ball rolling in terms of recruiting at a USC because of personal matters and whatnot. Not getting to stay there for as long as people may have thought he could have and developed how he thought he could have and built the program up. But the reality is that Sark has had 2 great seasons, right? Whereas a lot of these guys, Brian Kelly has had 14 good seasons. So it's something to look at, like when you are ranking these kind of coaches and whatnot. And when you look at historically, I just think Sarkis, he's 50 years old, right? And a lot of these guys are 63, for example, are, 15 years as a head coach, 20 years as a head coach. Whereas Sark has really done, I think he's got about 8 years as a head coach, 9 years as a head coach. Like I said, Washington was 1-11. But if I were to if we're nitpicking JD's list, for example, I think Kiffin's got to be in the top 10. I'd probably put Kiffin over Heupel. He's beat him head to head. And, Tennessee has that huge NIL collective. James Franklin, I think James Franklin is like your worst case Sark scenario, right? If Sark were to say not win against a top 5 team in the next 3 years, then you would start being like, all right, because right now, Sark, this is something you have to we're inside Texas football. We're going to have the Homer takes, obviously, right? We're Texas homers here. Shout out Texas Homer. But, Sark is 6-17 against the top 10, right? He has yet to win that marquee game. What was his biggest win, right? Probably at Alabama. And that Alabama team was kind of spotty at the beginning of 2023. 1-1 against Alabama, though, is impressive. And people could argue they should have won in 2022 if Quinn Ewers didn't get hurt. Hudson Card had to come in. But feel free to call in, guys. If you have any opinions on Sark, how you rate Sark in comparison to these more elite coaches in the upper echelon. I'm sort of in that range. I think Sark's in that 5 to 7 range is my personal opinion. I think it's hard to put him ahead of Dabo, in my opinion, because Dabo's won 2 titles, right? And Dabo built that at Clemson from basically nothing. That program is Dabo. Sark, you have a lot of advantages with that Longhorn, with that NIL Texas One fund, and the transfer portal working to your favor. And we see all the NFL talent, number 1 recruiting class. To say that resources doesn't affect a coach's result on the field, look at Ryan Day being 70-10. Do we really see Ryan Day? I personally don't see him as the second best coach in football. But, of course, there's a Harbaugh and Saban void in college football right now. I'd probably put Sark at around 5, personally. But, yeah, it's just what I'm saying is again, call in, comment, tell me what you think. We're going to bring in callers here in the next few minutes about where you guys see Coach Sark in the top 10. Give me your opinions. Tell me what you think, whether he should be higher or lower, if you like JD's list or not. But so to go back to what I'm saying is James Franklin is viewed a certain way because he's now been at Penn State for 10 years now almost. And that record is 5-23 against the top 5. I don't have it on the top of my head. But Sark is 6-17 versus top 10 teams. That's a real statistic. That's something you have to think about as you start wondering, oh, man, they came up short again. Oh, man, they came up short again. Losing to Georgia twice is not a good look for your legacy when you're talking about being a top 5 coach, when you're talking about being a historical coach, when you want to talk about Texas history-wise being in Mac Brown and Coach Royal's stature, right? So I believe that Sark is just getting started. That's where I'm at, is he's just getting started, right? Like I said earlier, he's in his second year of being, if you want to call it elite, title contender. Sark has just gotten Texas back, So this is just kind of projecting what could go good, what could go wrong in the future. But right now, I don't think you can put him ahead of title winners or guys who beat him, like Kalen DeBoer. I just think Kalen DeBoer, people are forgetting, like, yeah, he had a 9-4 season at Bama. They got gutted by transfers. This is a guy who went to the national title with Washington, and he beat Texas when they were the underdogs against Texas in the Sugar Bowl. They were underdogs against Oregon twice. Dan Lanning, I think Dan Lanning should be lower. He inherited a 10-win team, a team that had won the Rose Bowl a couple years prior with Justin Herbert. And, Mario Cristobal was recruiting great at Oregon, and Dan Lanning hasn't really proven much. He has not won a big game times 10. I mean, he hasn't beaten a team like, unless you want to count his Ohio State win was big the first time, but then we all know what happened the second time. Sark walking into Tuscaloosa, that is, I think, keeps Sark in this top 5 conversation. But aside from that, he lost to OU in 23 when OU was great. The other 2 times he's played, or 3 times, he blew a lead against OU the first time. Second time, he played a crappy OU team. And wow, I mean, how crappy has OU been in recent history? It is kind of funny to look at. But in 2024, obviously, that's a 6-7 OU team, throttled them again. But when he played OU the one time, that was a top clash between heavyweights, right? Between 2 great ranked teams, it didn't go his way. So we're gonna go ahead and just get into some callers here. But yeah, that's my take, is that you got to look at Sark's an 84-52 overall record. That is something I should mention before Longhorn Nation gets on me. 84-52 record, and of those other guys that JD has in the top 5, the next closest loss column wise is James Franklin has more losses, and James Franklin's the 9th best coach on this list. So it's just something to think of. And, obviously Lanning and Freeman haven't coached as many games. Dabo has less losses still, and he's won 180 games. I just think you can't put Dabo behind him. But Sark's got to get reps, right? He's got to get years. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in our first caller here. I want to get this activated. Let me know. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm right. What you think about JD's list. We're going to go ahead and bring our first caller to the stage. Tom, you're on the horn. What do you got for us?
Hey, what's going on, James?
Not much, man. How you feeling about JD's list?
I'm listening to you talk here about James Franklin and some of the other guys here, and it makes me think that there's a bit of a fork in the road coming up for Sarkisian. Is he going to fall into that, into this pattern of just losing these big games? He was very disappointed twice going against Georgia this year. Couldn't get it done in the big one in the Final Four game. And it just kind of seems like it's becoming a pattern. I see, we look at Marcus Freeman, who was the runner-up this year in his 3rd year, I believe. So he has 1 year at Notre Dame, 1 year more than Sark has at Texas, and he sort of got it done and figured it out. Very impressive results there. And I'm just wondering, is he going to take that step that Freeman has took, or is he just going to continue going down this road? And that statistic that you mentioned, the win-loss in the top 5 or top 10 matchups, I believe, was, it doesn't make me feel good, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that is something to think about, like Marcus Freeman, obviously, and same with Ryan Day. You can see in period of even a month how much the narrative can change. But with Marcus Freeman losing to Marshall 1 year and then losing to, what was the bet? Northern Illinois this year, right? And then he goes and becomes a national runner-up. The way I look at it is, I don't know if I'd go as far to put Freeman over Sark, but that's more of a conversation than I think people are really having. Is realistically, Sark is not as proven as, but Marcus Freeman got an easier path. One could argue beating Penn State, right? But he did beat Georgia, and that's something Sark hasn't done yet. So, I mean, it's just this is speculative talk. Obviously, you're just comparing and being theoretical, but I just think in terms of record, obviously Sark has more seasons under his belt. And yeah, his record is 84-52. And he coached at the likes of USC. He wasn't able to get a 10-win season at USC or Washington. He had some good seasons there. But, Notre Dame's got academic restrictions. Their recruiting classes are never going to come anywhere close to Texas's. So it is something you want to see that pop here. And people are expecting it with Arch Manning. So, I mean, while we can look at it, JD's looking at it more optimistically, and we can look at it more analytically and kind of nitpick because we are, Texas fans. Is what we want to do. We want the best out of this program. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think the next 2 years are kind of going to define Sark's legacy, in my opinion.
Got it. I agree.
All right. Well, thanks for getting on the horn, Tom. All right. We're going to bring in our next caller. We've got Terry.
Hey, James. How's it going?
Good, man. Terry, you're on the horn. How do you feel about this top 10 list from JD Bukel?
I mean, I feel all right about it. I think Sark should be probably about 4 or 5, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this, though. Hugh is going to be in the top 10 within the next 2 years, so it doesn't matter. Love it. I got to disagree with you about Lane Kiffin, Crybaby Lane. I can't see him in the top 10.
Why do you not see Lane as a top 10 coach?
I mean, to be honest, it seems like he's just he fumbled hard in the end of the season. He couldn't get his players on a straight line to win, and yeah. Other than that, I mean, I'm not a big fan of him either. Big fan of his daughter Landry, though. That's for sure.
Anything else, Terry?
I mean, do you see Hugh coming in top 10 sometime soon, or?
Well, the thing with Hugh Freeze is you'd run into my opinions of Sark times 10 because Hugh Freeze, he's got one 10-win season, if I remember correctly, at Ole Miss. He would have to put together a couple years at Auburn, and like you guys have got that recruiting class, like they've been recruiting great these past couple of years, top 10 recruiting classes, and now Jackson Arnold will, he didn't pan out at OU necessarily, but 5-star quarterback. You've got Cam Coleman. You've got some 5-star receivers. I mean,
he was on OU also, so you got to put that in account.
That is true, but people could argue that playing on Auburn offensively can just.
We have the recruits.
Yeah, you guys do have the recruits. I would love to see Auburn face off against Texas. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen until 2026 or beyond because of the modern era of college football. When you've got 18 teams in a conference, it's hard for everyone to play each other. But yeah, I don't know if Hugh Freeze is going to sniff this list. You've got to give him like 5 years, and he's got to get the ball rolling like he had at Ole Miss. Hopefully with no sanctions or allegations again. But if he could get the ball rolling like he had it at Ole Miss,
you know it.
Hey,
if the game he knows how to now, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean the NIL era helps prevent some of those recruiting scandals for sure. But yeah, if he can recruit the way he's recruiting and get some marquee wins like he did down in Oxford, out on the plains, then you could look at Auburn having a real elite coach again, and maybe Hugh can have them being a real competitor again like they were a few years back.
All right, I'm satisfied with that answer.
All right, thanks for calling in, Terry. And we got one more caller here. Gerald, you are on the horn.
All right, that got me fired up right there because I think Terry is smoking crack. Hugh Freeze is not even a top 25 head coach. Hugh Freeze melts when it matters most, even when it's snowing outside. I mean, he crumbles. And to say Lane Kiffin isn't a top 10 head coach, because, yeah, I totally agree. They fumbled back into the season. Kiffin finally gets his marquee big-time win. Everyone said he can't get a big win. Beats Georgia. Handily beats Georgia. I think that was their worst loss since 2017. I mean, you got James Franklin on this list. I don't even know how Josh Heupel's on here, to be
I can't
honest.
see how Heupel's done anything more than Lane yet. I mean,
and
I think
also,
Heupel's like
if you
Lane
look at all
was
of these guys
years
and
back.
you have their program and the resources that all of these dudes have on this list, and then you go to Ole Miss and Mississippi, I mean, it's not even close. He's doing more than some of these guys on this list with considerably less resources, money. He's in a state that doesn't have just a ton of talent. He's got to go and poach dudes from other states. And I mean, Terry, I don't even know what Terry's on about. Hugh Freeze.
Oh, he's an Auburn homer, man. He's got to believe.
He's got to believe. He's got to believe. But Lane Kiffin doesn't have multiple ex-quarterbacks talking about how much of a what he is.
Yeah. What do you think about Sark, though? Is Texas-centric program? What do we think about this list from JD in terms of Sark?
I think it's right now a little high, barely a little high. I think the only guy I would put ahead of him on this list right now, or two guys, sorry. I'd probably put DeBoer ahead of him as of now, and Dabo Swinney. I think the Dabo Swinney slander.
Well, I just think personally, I think Kirby ranking is right because Kirby had Sark's number this year. Kirby did have Sark's number this year. I'll give him that.
And I mean, back to back, that's hard to beat. I would probably, as of now, everyone's freaking out. DeBoer 9-3. If you really thought DeBoer was going to run the table or go undefeated with Alabama first year in, that guy's not Nick Saban. Nobody's Nick Saban. It wasn't going to happen. I'd probably put DeBoer ahead of Sark right now, and then just because I don't know, dude, I like Dabo. He's also, I mean, he was really running stuff with Clemson there for a while, and I mean, I think until some of these guys get a natty win under their belt, you got to kind of, in my opinion, I think you got to keep Dabo up there for now. But, I think Sark, he's slowly chipping away. He's climbing the list. I think he's a little high on JD's. Like you were saying, like the optimistic look. If you kind of take a little bit of step back, look at it a little more analytically, he's a little bit high for 3. I kind of like him around 4 or 5, though. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just, if you take your Texas hat off, and I know you're not a Texas fan, but the way I feel about it is that, yeah, you've got to see more results on the field. But as I said earlier, it is just year 2 of really being in national contention. So we would like to see next year, get a win in Columbus. That elevates you. They go at Sanford Stadium. If they can win at Kirby in Georgia, we be looking at this list next year, and you might have Sark. I would have Sark at 2, right?
Yeah, and I think within the next 2 years, he's making it to the Natty, if not winning the big one.
Yeah.
Give him 2-3 years. I think he makes it there, and he might even get himself a national championship.
Yeah, let's hope, man. Let's hope. Hey, thanks for calling in again, Gerald.
Appreciate it, as always.
All right, we're going to bring in one more caller. We got Jackson. Jackson, you're on the horn. How do you feel about this list from JD Piquel?
How you doing, James?
Good. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Yeah, I agree a lot with what was the last caller's name?
Gerald
about Dabo. I mean, he just deserves the respect to be higher. I mean, you saw what he did in his prime and his dominance at Clemson, and it's kind of hard. Like, do you count his stubbornness with the transfer portal as his quality of a coach? Like, does that raise or lower him on the list for you? I guess that's a fair argument. And then the other thing is, I think Sark should be ahead of Ryan Day.
Yeah.
Just from what I saw from him this year, I didn't think he coached very well this year. I know they won the national championship. But a lot of different factors go into that. I think when you have when your backfield is Travion Henderson and Quinshaw Judkins, and you have a top O-line in the country, and you can't get the running game going until week 10, I mean, I think that's a pretty, I don't understand that at all, and I don't think it's the second best coach in the country.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, this roster was obviously highly touted before the season. They had their $20 million roster. Quinshaw and Travion, I mean, 2 of the top 5 running backs in the country. You still lose to Michigan. You still don't even make a conference championship appearance. I personally, and I've been big on this, like just talking off air with my buddies, is I think, Ryan Day and Ohio State really were saved by this new 12-team playoff era. In any other year, they're going and playing a Rose Bowl, and, half those players are sitting out. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. It's like, I think you can interchange Sark and Day. Like, if Sark was at Ohio State and he's taking over after Urban Meyer, he's probably winning a title already. Like, we're talking about Sark taking over for Tom Herman, and God bless him, but, the culture was a bit in disarray. It took a couple of years for him to reset Texas back to the old standards.
Yeah, and I agree. And while the system that Texas is, people say it's easy to succeed there because of all the resources you have, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, it makes it a lot harder to come in, change the culture, and set the course right when you have all these expectations, all these boosters breathing down your neck. It's big shoes to fill. Obviously, Charlie Strong couldn't do it, neither could Tom Herman. And Sark came in and did it. He took command. He got those recruiting classes going. And the other thing you've seen the last 2 years is you've seen Sark lose his starting running back, his second-string running back, and still able to churn out running backs that are putting out like Travion Wisner. He had 169 one game against OU. I mean, he's able to adapt and keep the offense flowing with injuries.
Yeah, and I think also I'm just the way I see it and why I don't think he's top 3 yet is just because I go results based, and I just think I haven't seen him win that game aside from at Bryant-Denny. But yeah, the point about being able to adapt and basically virtually have no running game in a lot of their major games, and still that was down to the wire with Georgia. Yeah. Arguably should have won if Auburn doesn't clink a couple field goals. And that Ohio State game's still right down to the wire, right? And you basically have, Trey Wisner's a great utilized back, and he's a good power runner at times. Solid, reliable back, but he's not an explosive guy. He's not a CJ Baxter. He's not a Jonathan Brooks. He wasn't even as explosive as Jalen Blue, and Jalen Blue had his problems with fumbling. But the fact that CJ Baxter went down in camp, and Texas is still right down to the wire at the end of the season is a testament to Sark's culture, I believe, and just how good of a coach he was. But it's like Texas is back in these positions where we're having these conversations, which is great. And that is like none of these guys, and I did talk a little bit about that. None of the guys on this list, aside from Dabo, really, and I'd say Kirby really built something. Dan Lanning didn't build something.
Yeah.
DeBoer, obviously, I think he's great, but he didn't build anything at Bama yet, obviously. And Ryan Day was, the memes, of course, Michigan fans love, is born on third base. I think Harbaugh would say that. But so I do think that is a reason you got to have Sark top 5.
Yeah, because when you look at the landscape of the national landscape, there's really only 3 or 4 teams that are, maybe 5 or 6, depending on how you look at it, that, everything, the wheels are spinning in every area, like recruiting classes, boom, boom, boom. Like we're never worried about losing talent because we've got so much coming in. We've got our coaches, we've got our guys. Like it's really only Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon kind of with Phil Knight making their way in there. There's very few programs where there's no weak points almost in the functionality of it. And I think that's a testament to Sark.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I love the future. And I think you get CJ Baxter back and Arch Manning, who people are saying will run his system better, and the mobility will help with the red zone offense. And hopefully a couple of those receivers hit. It really did save Ryan Day that you had like Calvin Johnson incarnate as a true freshman with Jeremiah Smith. But we'll see, man. I think the next couple of years will really decide Sark's legacy, if he's just a really good coach or if he's a historically, elite coach.
100%.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in again, Jackson. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
How about that, guys? Off-season content. We spend 30 minutes, more than half an hour, talking about J.D. PicKell's top 10 list. And while I call J.D. PicKell a friend of the program, and he's a great guy, always helped me out, fellow Baylor guy, for those who don't know, I think that list needs a slight remodel. And if you need a remodel, you should call Luxe Kitchen and Bath.
This video is brought to you by Luxe Kitchen and Bath. Luxe has been offering high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for 3 generations throughout the greater Austin area. With 5-star review after 5-star review on Google and Facebook, and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, you can put your faith in Luxe Kitchen and Bath's award-winning designers and skilled craftspeople to bring to life that dream vision of your special home. But that's not all. Luxe's all-star team provides full remodels, large additions, and even commercial build-outs as well. So call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUXE today. Or visit luxekitchenbath.com to discover where quality meets luxury and begin the process of transforming your home. Get a free quote today by calling 833-358-LUXE. That's LUXE. Or by visiting luxekitchenbath.com. Link in the description.
All right. Thank you, LC. I've been doing these solo shows. I haven't been on a show with LC in a while. I miss his beautiful face. But shout out Luxe, guys. If you don't need a kitchen remodel, break something, break a drawer, slam a cabinet, tell your mom to use Luxe Kitchen and Bath, because shout out to them. They are my only sponsor, because when you give a young kid a show, not a lot of people want to sponsor the show, but thank you to Don from Luxe and those guys for riding it out with me and being my first and currently only sponsor. So applications, leave them in the comments. I would love Big League Chew. And but let's just continue the trend. We're talking about Texas. We're talking about legacy, all-time wins, records, all that sort of stuff. Let's take a look at Texas and their all-time wins and where they rank among all the elite programs. So I saw this on Instagram the other day. One of my buddies sent it to me, and it's just really interesting to see. They posted this, all time, last 25 years, last 5 years. And I just wanted to kind of look at it and talk about it and see what you guys think about it. So obviously, we know Texas is a historic program. They're 5th in all-time wins, behind Notre Dame, Bama, or Ohio State. Ooh, almost said Oklahoma State. No offense to Gundy and the boys, but they are not top 5 in all-time wins. And then Michigan at number 1. The only one with 1,000 wins is Michigan. Texas has 961 wins all time. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the Mandela effect at play. But I swear I remember right after the Colt McCoy run that Texas was number 1 in wins. I don't know if I'm misremembering this or if I was just 9 years old, but I swear I thought that Texas was number 1 in wins, like they used to say, winningest program in football history or college football history. And then let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that, or call in if you feel free to. But yeah, I swear I thought Texas was number 1 in wins. And then those, the down years that we don't talk about, the 9 seasons with no 10-win seasons that we all remember too fondly. I remember Taysom Hill hurdling people at DKR when I was a young boy. But yeah, so Texas is obviously 6th in that list. They racked up a ton of those wins in the 60s and early 70s. As we remember, they won 3 titles in a 10-year period. That was a dominant era with Coach Royal, Fred Akers years. I mean, they were racking up 10-win seasons, conference titles, dominating the Southwest Conference. We know Texas is historically one of the best programs, but, to quote Tommy Shelby, and correctly this time, I tried it last show, she's in the past, and the past is not of my concern. Which, if you haven't watched Peaky Blinders, turn on Netflix and turn this off and watch Tommy Shelby, because that show is great. But yes, the past is not of our concern. While the 60s are great, as we see our old little buddies down at the bottom there, Texas A&M, shout out to them. They can have a claim to fame. They probably racked up all those wins, because I looked at the other lists. They are not on the ones since 2000 or the ones in the last 50 years. But in the last 100 years or all time, they are 14th in wins. Congrats. But we do not want to dwell on the past or worry about the past, because what does that do for us now, folks? Yeah, but as Bob Ross says, you have to have dark to have light. So we love Texas A&M. If we weren't able to, juxtapose their success to ours, what would we even have, right? It's fun to look at A&M and see them, hey, they're on a list, right? But we still have 150 more wins than them, 170 more. I was a communications major. I'm not good at math on the fly. But yeah, it's funny to see them down there. But we don't care about that. Let's take a look at wins in the last 25 years. Boom, look at that. I'm a producer and a host now. Going to add that one to the resume. Maybe I could get a real job. Who knows? Do I want a real job? No. But let's look at that, huh? Texas in the last 25 years. So this is, I was alive for most of this. I don't remember much of it until about 2008. But hey, so Texas since 2000 is 7th in wins. So they're 5th all time. They're 7th in the, the modern era. You typically say AP poll era or, post World War II when they're talking about modern era. But I would say that this is like the era that I think really matters. BCS era, if you want to do that. How competitive you've been in the last, 30 years. And the general fan base still remembers this success, right? Most of the fans still remember Max like 9 straight 10-win seasons. But, modern history, Texas is averaging about 9 wins a season. They've got 226 wins in 25 seasons. That's really good. That is really good. That's 7th best. And you see there's teams like Boise State on there, right? Boise, props to them. I don't know that we'll ever see someone duplicate that success in modern college football now, because they'll just get their players poached. It's a shame. It's such a great landscape we've got of college football now in the 12-team playoff and NIL. But yeah, so Boise is up there. But of the power programs, it's not great seeing Oklahoma ahead of us. They won their last title in 2000. We, of course, got ours in 2006. But yeah, since 2000, Oklahoma, they racked up those 10-win seasons. We know they didn't do anything with it. They didn't actually ever win a playoff game. They still haven't. So hey, let them have their wins. Let them have their wins, right? But yeah, so Texas in the last 25 years, I mean, that's an elite program. They're an elite program all time. They're an elite program in the last 25 years. So this is stuff you can show to players to show recent success. But my question for you guys, and I would love for y'all to call in or get active in the comments, is, where do you rank Texas on programs? We're just doing a lot of rankings. That's what people do in the off season. But yeah, do you see Texas as a top 5 program in college football currently? Where do you kind of rank them in this? I would give them the nudge over Oklahoma. I think surely just NIL saved Texas on that front because Oklahoma just doesn't have that level of money, and that really did help Texas. I think it kind of saved Sark in the program because you remember 2021 losing to Kansas 5-7. Things look kind of grim, and then you can get Quentin Ewers back because a little bit of NIL, and that's a factor. Kelvin Banks, they flipped DJ Campbell, I believe. They got some guys to flip from Oregon thanks to NIL. And they got their first 5-star lineman since the Mac Brown era. So NIL really saved Texas in a lot of ways, guys. So maybe NIL is not all bad, but yeah. So I'm curious what you guys think. I think Texas right now, if you're going to rank programs, I'd put them over Oregon because I just think if you're betting future, right? What do you think of when you think of top 5 current programs? I think Georgia. I think Alabama still, even though Saban really shifted that dynamic leaving. I think, Oregon is outside looking in my opinion. Who can win a title in 3 years? Who can flip a switch and they're a national title contender? Overnight, we saw Texas do that with Sarkisian coming in and NIL, right? Can Ohio State do that? Yes. Can Michigan do it? Kind of, but they're more of a developmental program, right? Oklahoma, I actually do not think so. And I'm not just saying that because I don't like Oklahoma. If I mentioned it earlier, I went to Baylor. So I technically don't have super hatred for Oklahoma in my heart. But I don't think Oklahoma is now at a stage where you can just boom, flip of a switch, win a natty. USC's out of the mix now. So, Texas is in that top 5 of competitive elite programs that you can, with the drop of a hat, be a national title contender, in my opinion. But feel free to call in, guys, and let me know where you kind of rank Texas currently in the modern era. Do you think they're better than LSU, for example, when you look at the next 3 years? LSU, they've had some trouble with Bryce Underwood bailing, and the transfer portal kind of gutted Brian Kelly, and people have kind of bailed on the LSU hype train, right? So that's just kind of where I'm thinking about it, and it's just fun to look at. Is I think Texas has surely surpassed Oklahoma due to NIL and now recent success, because I think Venables is in a tough spot. He's got to win this year. So when you look at that, Clemson, we know they don't do transfers. They don't have as huge of an NIL. They have good NIL investment, though, but their recruiting class was 18th or 19th this past year. I think they had 1 DB commit, if I remember what the great Justin Wells told me correctly. But so at Georgia, you got to have Georgia, Ohio State up there. Bama's up there. And then you start to look like who? It's Texas, right? It's Texas. Is it USC anymore? No. Is it Miami anymore? I don't think so. I don't see a world where Lincoln Riley wins a national title at USC. Maybe I'm just a hater, but I don't see it. I don't see a world where Mario Cristobal wins a title at Miami with Carson Beck. We played against Carson Beck. We remember the 4 interceptions or 3 interceptions in a game, right? So, and just the fan base is not there. The investment's not there. Michigan, they just did it, but that was first time since 97. And before then, they hadn't won one since 45. So, Texas is really prime position. When people say this, they're not being hyperbolic. Texas is in prime position to become a dynasty. And now that maybe, dynasty might be a little drastic to say, and that's crazy talk, right? This is just off-season talk. But if Texas rattles off a title in the Arch Manning era, there's no reason to believe that a guy like KJ Lacey or Diabell couldn't come in and you get a number 1 recruiting class, because that changes things, guys. When you get number 1 linemen and they're recruiting 5-star D linemen like Justice Terry, it changes the conversations around the country about Texas, because people would say, I'll argue with friends about Texas and they'll go, oh, you're just arguing this because of your job now. You're just defending Texas because of your job now. Well, like I said, I went to Baylor. I grew up here, but, I went to Baylor and I grew up a Kentucky fan. So I like Texas, but I'm not arguing from the perspective of a total diehard homer. I'm just arguing from an analytical perspective. And the fact is that Tom Herman and Charlie Strong didn't get 5-star linemen, right? So when you get 5-star linemen, that's what our last caller Jackson was mentioning there's no holes. There's no chinks in the armor for Texas, right? Recruiting, check. Facilities, check. Investment, check. NIL, check. Coach, check. Players, check. Right? Quarterback now. I mean, Quinn was a check, right? He had some injuries at the end, but running back CJ Baxter coming back. They've got all the levels from a 30,000 foot view of what a program, like what makes a program a national title contender, right? And then you throw in the fact that now they've got Arch Manning and they're recruiting like a top 3 team. So I just think the way where Texas is positioned, there's no reason they couldn't have a Georgia run. They couldn't have a Clemson run. Excuse me. And people have told me not to burp on camera. I'm only human. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear what you guys think, where you see Texas in the future. That's Texas in the last 25 years. But I really believe that Texas, if they play their cards right, and talking about some of the things we mentioned, like their program, their culture, their system is a recipe for a national title. And if Sark can win in the next couple of years, then we will see a different conversation about not only Sark, but also about the program, right? So this is just stuff to think about. Like, things can turn overnight. Sorry, guys. Producer, I got to check the phone sometimes and also now do the hosting. A little different form for me. Haven't quite got used to this yet, but trying to balance it all. But anyways, so like I was saying, it's very similar. Sark and Texas are in very similar positions. They're in that top 5 cusp, right? And you think of them as really good, but are they elite yet? Are they going to be historic? Here, I'll just go ahead and pull up the next thing I wanted to look at was last 5 years, right? And we know these are down years. That's including the first Sark year and obviously Herman. But in the last 5 years, Texas is 14th in wins. They're averaging about 8.8 wins a year, almost 9. I guess, do you think kids look at that and care that, say, Michigan has been better in the last 5 years or Clemson has been better in the last 5 years? I don't think so. Or like, look, Texas has the same amount of wins as Ole Miss, basically. Now, you look at recruiting rankings. Does that matter? We had an earlier caller who's an Ole Miss fan. Does, Ole Miss having recent success? They've had 3 10-win seasons under Lane in the last 4, right? That's really good. But they're still going to recruit in the teens because that's the state of Mississippi just doesn't have that resources. And, Ole Miss is great, but like there is no reason, and that's kind of what my point is earlier on the coaching side, is there's no reason Sark can't win a natty next year. Do I think it'll happen next year? Probably not, just because it's Arch's first year as a starter. But I think in the second year of Arch starting, you should be competing for a national title. So my take is top 5 program right now, top 5 program historically. That's up to you guys if you want to let me know in the comments or call in. They're not top 5 in natties. They're top 5 in wins. They are behind OU in natties. They're behind Nebraska in natties even. Obviously Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. Texas is like outside the top 10 in natties with 4 national titles, but hopefully that changes soon, guys. So we're going to go ahead and bring our first caller in on the subject of Texas and the program and history and all that. Mike, you are on the horn. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Texas is a top 5 program right now. I mean, especially the last 2 years, obviously, and the last 3 years in particular, when they started actually recruiting, inside the top 5 every year, essentially, and also developing, because obviously we see with, down the road with Texas A&M, you can get good recruiting classes, but you actually have to see them pan out. You have to see them stay, for one, especially in the transfer portal era. So, I also would say Oregon, for instance, probably one of the other teams that Texas has been competing with for recruits. I mean, how long is that really going to last with Phil Knight eventually? I mean, he's 100 years old, it seems like. So, there's only a few other programs that are really at Texas's level resource-wise, and one of them probably isn't going to be there forever. So, I think you feel pretty good about the future of Texas, especially with Sarkisian there now.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon, to your point, is basically trying to do the way of buying their way to being a blue blood, and it is very reliant on Phil Knight, who, great man. He's trying his hardest and pouring his heart into and pockets into trying to get Oregon a national championship. Hasn't worked out yet. But yeah, I do wonder if when Phil Knight is out of the picture, if Oregon's still investing at that level, if Oregon still has NIL to that level. And yeah, back to like a team like Notre Dame, they've got obviously the academic restrictions. They don't have the NIL funds as a small private school. They have great NIL investment, but they don't have the level of a Texas, and Texas's pockets run deep, obviously, with the oil money and the Texas One Fund now. So I do think NIL really did save Texas, but for the future, like, yeah, I mean, it's really setting up to Texas's advantage because Michigan had back-to-back, 3 in a row elite years. Harbaugh leaves, so they kind of have to reset. Oklahoma, both your rivals are not serious national title contenders. And now, like, Saban leaves the sport. It's really like Kirby, and then you got to worry about Ohio State. But Ohio State just lost. They had what made the difference was that elite, NFL level coordinator room they had with Knowles and Chip Kelly now just left. So it really does set up to be favorable for Texas in the next 3 to 5 years. The question is just whether they will actually capitalize on it. Because like you said, with recruiting classes, it does need to pan out for fans. Well, not fans, but for players, particularly these young kids, to feel like they're making the right choice. Because we see with A&M just had a one and done 2022 number 1 recruiting class. Half those kids transferred or gone. A lot of them you haven't heard of in 3 years. So it really is just like they've got to see that there is now a pattern of a successful culture similar to what Alabama and Georgia have gotten. And another point to that is that Texas now is putting in double-digit players in the NFL draft, probably will again this year. When Sark arrived there, he couldn't even get, I don't think a single player got drafted in 2022. So there is just that change, and there's a wave that Sark can kind of ride. The question is will he control it, and will he utilize it to turn them into Ohio State or Georgia, or will they stay, kind of a notch below, and then if he leaves, it fizzles out? That, these next 2 years I think are very crucial for this program.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't get a couple of titles in the next 10 years, it'd be kind of disappointing, especially in just everything that seems to be going in that direction, I guess. It all seems to be coming together. Like there isn't really anything you're like, man, there's just a big hole in this operation, so.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think the last caller Jackson says, like, made a good point. Like all the wheels are in motion. Like everything is, there's not one like weak spot where you go like with an Oregon, it's like, oh, we're relying on Phil Knight, or we're not in a heavy, dense recruit area. Literally everything is working to Texas's favor. What I just, let's see if they'll actually take advantage of it and have success.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Mike. Yeah. And thank you guys for listening. Would love to hear more comments from you all, but that's kind of just where my take is on it. Like these next couple of years will sort of decide Sark's legacy and Texas as a program. If Texas can get back to that 2000s, early to late 2000s run with Mac Brown, where it was 9-10 win seasons in a row, 2 natty appearances, 1 national championship, multiple conference championships. Hey, I mean, we've seen Texas now go from Big 12 championship to, SEC runner-up in their first year in the hardest conference in football, they tell us. Texas won't compete in that conference, they tell us. Well, hey. But yeah, I mean, I think Texas will be a force to be reckoned with. Reckoned with? Force to be I'm going to have to give that one a goog. I don't know if I'm saying that. Force to be wrecked with. Reckoned with? I am. Beats me. Again, I'm a communications major, not exactly an intellectual. But yeah, they will be a team you do not want to face in the future in the SEC. I don't think it really matters who they go toe-to-toe with, as we saw. Like, you used to be worried if Texas was playing on the road at Ohio State or at Alabama. And now it feels like where Sark's got them and the bodies he can throw at people and the way they keep recruiting and the just sort of the gauntlet and the factory that is Texas up front on defense, for example, and DBU being back with Jahdae and, Taff and Makuba this year. So it's really just all signs are bright, guys. It's exciting. Hopefully we can turn to the years of this fella right here, Mr. VY. Official Rose Bowl patch. I don't know if any of you guys had these growing up. I don't even know what these toys were called. But yeah, this thing sitting right behind me, really cool. My brothers and I used to collect these growing up. But yeah, I think we can return to the days of the great VY right here. I mean, assuming nothing drastic happens, right? I mean, maybe I'm being too optimistic, and maybe I'm too new to this scene to not still have the doubts of, I know some Texas fans still are a little bit pessimistic because of the better path of the last decade and, being disappointed and let down on some major games and whatnot. But hey, we'll see next year, guys. We'll learn fast. You'll know by 2026 if Texas really is back, if you want to say it like that. Joe Tessitore shout out. Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what happens to start out the year at Columbus. But, we'll be covering all the offseason. We'll be preparing you guys for next year. We'll be covering the spring game, all the recruiting. And, you'll know first here at Inside Texas if you tune in. We'll be able to tell you what's happening in 2026 before it does happen. And if, they can build off that number 1 recruiting class, which, by the way, make sure you subscribe to Inside Texas. And follow me on Instagram if you're feeling generous at Jamerson Hayden. Give us a follow on social media at Inside Texas on Instagram and Twitter, guys. It takes 2 seconds. I promise I won't post too much. I won't bombard you, but we post great stuff on there. I make graphics and videos and stuff. We've got a good following on Instagram and Twitter. So I appreciate you guys all tuning in. I didn't get to the Jahdae Bear and Thorpe Museum thing. I've taken way too long. I'm a bit of a yapper. That's kind of why I want to do this for a career. But I appreciate y'all coming along for the ride. This was episode 8, I believe, of On the Horn. Make sure to make sure to subscribe, and share it if you like it. Even if you don't like it, share it to someone and tell them how much you don't like it. I just want the views, guys. I'll admit I'm a bit of a publicity hound, but hey, thank you for tuning in. Seriously, I do appreciate it. We'll be working out the kinks all off season. Hopefully I'll be getting better at hosting and producing now. Shout out to Texas Homer. He helped me do this show. Shout out to all the guys in Inside Texas. And peace.